Hi, I'm Tabitha Poppin. I was class of 2019 for the Executive MBA program. And the area of business that I chose to go into was I became an asylum officer with the Department of Homeland Security, which is a little bit different than you would normally look at for business, but it is there's a lot of business involved with dealing with asylum and refugee programs through USCIS. So I'm currently on hiatus from that, living in Germany with my military spouse, and hope to go back to that in a few months when my husband deploys.
Hi, my name's Andre Dean. I'm the class of 2017. I currently work for Ernst & Young. I'm in their business consulting practice where I kind of specialize with challenged programs. Talking about around 100, $500 million programs that are challenged. And my job is to kind of go in and structure them, restructure them from both a technology perspective and from a program management perspective. And that's currently what I do now.
I was very excited and lucky to be able to join both of the immersion programs that we had during the EMBA that I was a part of. We went to China and Hong Kong. And then during our springtime immersion, we went to Chile and Argentina and did an economics project from there. Within China, we really had a great experience because we had the opportunity to see all of the amazing corporate things that take place in Hong Kong. And then when we went into Shanghai, we also got to see sort of how things are done in that area as well. When we went to Chile and Argentina, we had the opportunity to go and visit other corporate headquarters and that sort of thing throughout those areas. We went to vineyards and wineries for the purpose of business, to see how they ran things. And with that in mind, we were able to overall get a cultural understanding of how they view business and what that looks like for them. The global immersions were a really big deal for me in the sense that I was able to see how cultural plays a role in business and how important it is to our global stage today.
So being a student in the Mason School of Business at William & Mary in the Executive MBA program, the global immersion experience is incredible. I kind of traveled my whole life, and for EY I traveled, but the reason why I went into the MBA program was because I lacked I would say, global experience as far as from a business perspective, and I did not have the business acumen to be able to understand executives, for instance, and I didn't really understand the global stage of accounting, marketing, and finance. So it was nice to be able to, sit in school for the first couple of semesters and really get our, buckle down on accounting and finance and marketing and all those things that will prepare us for these global immersions. Because the way William & Mary does it is they get us structured in foundation and, and rooted in accounting and finance. And all of those other academic things so that we can understand and take it all in at warp speed. So as we prepared for our global immersions, we made a great job of getting us ready. So I wish I could remember her name. Jana can help me out, our professor. She's no longer there, but she was amazing in getting us ready to be able to experience China and what things to look for. So again, I've traveled the world, but when I'm actually arriving in China, I was awestruck because you hear about, these mass buildings, you hear about the, cities that are built and no one's in them. And then you also understand how big of a powerhouse China is on the international market and stage. And I really didn't understand what that meant. When you're growing at 6% GDP and we're at 3%, how is that so? And then you get there and it's just, you kind of see how the things work. You kind of see how the economics breaks down. You understand more about how they're doing that and understanding kind of our place in the market and everyone else's place in the market from that perspective and how China will remain a powerhouse. From our perspective, we were looking at just understanding the culture. So one of the things that kind of helped me from an EY perspective is we were trying to land some work with a China client. We kept failing and we didn't understand why. And I was able to step in and help soon, I mean, maybe a month or two right after I got back from the first immersion, which was China, to kind of help them, give them a perspective on the culture and kind of what things that we embrace as an American culture and what things they may not embrace. And specifically for us, we were in program risk management, which kind of exposes some of the problems and processes and that nature. So when we came into that, we were saying it's great to understand your governance as far as how decisions are made, and understand how the marketing plays into that. And our marketing, I say our marketing account, our marketing approach really wasn't appealing to them, and neither were our services. So with my knowledge applied to understanding what we were trying to present, we had to rearrange how we presented it, and it ended up being a win. So we started to gain a little bit of work in China about basically helping them manage their programs, manage their companies a little bit different from a cultural perspective. The second thing was Germany. Germany was amazing. We had a blast. And I'd been to Germany so many times. My prior background is in military. So I did military intelligence there. And so I traveled there all the time. It's probably why Tabitha is there right now, some form of military there. But I really didn't understand it from a business perspective. So arriving there as a business student and getting to understand, we went to the Ministry of Economics, Jenna, I believe. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Ministry of Economics, where we get to see and understand more about the power of the EU. Because in America, we're really not understanding how important the EU was. And at the time, Brexit was still a question. And it was a very interesting time because President Trump wasn't president quite yet. So and I believe France was also getting a new prime minister or a new person there, president itself. So I had spent a lot of time on that juxtaposition, trying to understand what is that going to mean if, and I believe also Germany was also in the midst of re-election as well. So with all of these things around, we focused on more of the black swan events. And I was like, what's a black swan event? A black swan event is an event that's highly unlikely and typically not modeled for. And I believe 2020, 2019, 2018 is a whole black swan model event where we had played a bunch of different situations from a marketing perspective and from an economics perspective, what that would mean if, President Trump was in and he kind of removed a lot of the ability for Europe to be able to import products, for us to import products there, and then put a tax on that. What would that look like from a GDP perspective? What would that look like from our economic perspective? And then how politically would that play in? And so we got to learn a lot about how Germany operates, how important it is from an EU perspective for workers, for migrant workers. And then the interesting thing that I found was Germany has a really good program for bringing them in and becoming German citizens. And they have a program for someone who, from Romania has a baking skill. You just can't roll into Germany and open up a bakery. You have to have a skill. You have to be able to prove that skill. And you also have to be able to speak German pretty fluently. And they have programs set up to help those individuals become functioning citizens within Germany. And so that struck me as something that I think all countries have, and including the US, but they're really focused on really getting them to be productive in the way Germany wants them to be productive, along with that quality standard. So that was very interesting when we were there.
Tabitha, were there insights, concepts that you learned or gleaned during the global experience that you took away and applied, in your everyday work?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the interesting things that I found when we went to Fudan University in Shanghai and we listened to the economists there was how very candid they were about how they were just so upfront about how things are, quote, really working there. And I think it really, really gave perspective on like I said, it was just really interesting to me how they just laid it all out. And they know what needs to happen in order for China to continue to do well, to grow, to do better. but they also recognize the limitations. And I was kind of surprised at that. And to just learn more about sort of what we don't hear about. We're very sheltered from how China does business in the US. At least that's my experience. In terms of when we traveled to Chile and Argentina, there's a lot of, when we went to the different companies, there's a lot of what I would consider to be, they're very confident. They're very, what I would say, they saw themselves as up and coming or already arrived, and they weren't afraid to switch tracks if they needed to in order to succeed. And so it's like, well, if the US isn't going to do this, or Western countries over here aren't going to help us with this, then we'll just go over here because they're offering this over here. So they're willing to switch tracks if they need to, which gave me a very sort of, as being from the US, we're all we feel very safe and confident in our business structures. But just to see that people are willing to kind of change gears if they need to was kind of a wake up call as well. It's an amazing experience. Everybody was very just open and willing to explain and talk about how things worked. So that was good.
I think the comment, Andre, that you'd made earlier, 6% growth in GDP and an economy driven by 1.5 billion people.
Yes.
Compared to an economy driven by 320, 30
Yeah.
million here. Yeah. I mean, it compounds itself, right? In terms of the magnitude of that economy. And anybody that thinks that, the coming century is not going to be the century of China is not a student of economics or the global economy, right?
Well, one of the things I just remembered was I was kind of floored. We went to 3Nod. 3Nod was a technology type of company where we went through and walked. We had one of their executive directors or senior vice presidents, I think, walk with us and kind of show them all the new gadgets, the new toys they have. One of them was I believe it was an ammo can that had a stereo in it, and the way he pumped it up, and the way the Chinese, once you understand the culture, that they are a premium type of attitude towards services, and that's kind of what they want. So when you look in the shops, they're more luxury shops, they're more premium types of products. And they like to relate that to a celebrity or relate that to something that gives that product more value. I understood that. I didn't understand that before, but I understood it once we got there. And I was shocked because when you look at and understand how, China is a powerhouse in the manufacturing industry, and understanding that there is a problem with them stealing. We think they are stealing, patents and, taking the trade secrets and building other products off the side on a different market avenue for China versus the premium. And I think that was interesting to me because a lot of those products really weren't all that great. And we had seen them before, except for I was starstruck by his presentation, how they were selling it. And I was like, 3Nod is the best. This is great. I can't wait to see an ammo can. And I was like, wait, it's an ammo can with the sound system in it. That actually really wasn't that good. So what he had said was that they had a relationship with American inventors and relationships with other people who are in the manufacturing business, who they had gotten over there to make and produce this product, and they were excited about breaking into the American market. However, it was a struggle based upon the products that they had, and then, ultimately, I don't believe that probably we've ever seen that product hit the United States. So it was eye-opening for me from a student perspective, understanding economics, and then understanding the overall impact that China has if they continue to use and take techniques and industry knowledge that isn't theirs, and how that impacts other countries. And so when President Trump was president and he was very strict on China, I supported that because, again, that intellectual knowledge, that intellectual things that we're doing and the producing of those products is an important thing. But from another side, is from a I guess, a people person, human resources perspective, where half of that, I don't know the exact number, but I believe a large portion of the Chinese are not well-to-do. They're not doing very much poverty around. And so we did see where there's living quarters on the manufacturing plant for these people to go and work, and they come from all areas of China to come work in these factories because they need work, but they're not getting paid that much. So, how does that impact our responsibility as a nation? How does that impact globally of us continuing to use China as a manufacturing powerhouse, understanding the conditions that the people who are building these products are living in? And that struck me and kind of made me want to go. I was like, I want to be able to open up a business. I want to use China. But then when you look at it from that perspective, that's not something that I want to support. And then when you think about it from a politics perspective, how do you get China to change their ways and continue to produce the products at the price that we would need and the margins we would need in order to make the product worth manufacturing, or keeping that in the supply chain? One of the things that we did right after we got back from China was we did a project on supply chain. I chose supply chain. So what I did was I traced the supply chain throughout the iPhone. So the iPhone was the product. I was responsible for kind of telling the story and the impact if China wasn't in the picture. So President Trump at the time on his campaign trail was going to say that, hey, I'm going to put restrictions on China. So all other companies are trying to figure out, what's our game plan from a marketing perspective? What's our game plan from a manufacturing and margin perspective? How do we redo our supply chain? And I didn't really understand supply chain until I actually got to William & Mary as well, where we had a professor come in and help us understand that. Now, one of the good things about being an executive MBA is we don't get the, I won't to say any professors regular, but we have industry leading professors who are currently in the industry, currently respected in the industry, and are current. And ours was Professor Raj.
Yes.
And he was amazing. Yeah, he was amazing. Yes. So he was amazing. He was amazing at getting us to understand the supply chain process and understanding the impact of where it's built and how that impacts margin and how do we look at that from a global perspective. So once I was able to kind of put all those pieces together, write this paper about the iPhone and write about the impact that China would have, that United States would have when we reduced our ability to produce in China, what would that do to the prices globally from the iPhone? What would that do, to the industry as a whole? And on top of that, I know on the campaign trail, Trump was saying that he was going to decrease the business tax. So I think we were taxing at around 30% for that, reintroduction of money into the United States. So when you give the businesses a 30% tax, the idea was that, that would, spawn more manufacturing and more kind of inventions and more things in the United States. And we didn't see that. I don't think the business saw that big boost and revenue and applied that to jobs and applied that to building factories. So putting that all together, I know I said a lot, but putting that all together, that perspective I would not have had and understood when I heard the business tax, being reduced, and that was going to automatically, create jobs. We had a large debate on whether that would really happen. And then again, to get back to my original thought, how would that impact the supply chain and what would that do to America's ability to produce products and be competitive in the market space?
So it sounds like, while you were experiencing the global immersions, trade imbalance, for example, or tariffs and theft of intellectual property as it pertains to China, it sounds like those concepts were discussed, in that environment where perhaps you were hearing an alternative perspective, or maybe the Chinese perspective about that issue, where just domestically you would hear the United States point of view about it. So was that valuable, understanding the issue from the other side of the table and the impact economically that China feels, and why they may take a different stand than the United States does when it comes to issues like IP theft?
I do fully agree with you. And I feel like in some ways with the whole 30% thing, didn't Apple just move everything to Ireland because of because they did have to lower the taxes here recently, didn't they, about a year ago, to a dinner with Dr. Greenwood and Dr. Hewitt. Dr. Greenwood is the one who he's the father of the Hong Kong dollar peg. And I talked to him a little bit, interestingly, that night. I was like, so, now that the contract is kind of changing and all of this is going on, how do you feel like things are going to go with the Hong Kong dollar peg? And he's like, oh, and everything's going to be fine. It's really just, it's just a snafu, it's just a hiccup. It's just a hiccup. And so I was like, all right, well, you're the pro, you've been doing this a very long time, and and then to see everything that happened with Hong Kong afterwards. So he was the professional in that area. And of course, you can't predict so much of what's going on there. But that's what I meant when I was also talking about how I was really surprised at their candidness, the professors' candidness when we were at Fudan University, and their willingness to speak to not only the Chinese side, but to the flaws in their system as well. They talked about both. And that's what intrigued me the most, because I was not expecting that. I was expecting it to be very promotional of the way they did things.
It's a really interesting insight, and one that I think a lot of Americans might, raise an eyebrow, because we see the way the Chinese government clamps down on free speech and those speaking their mind, and to hear that there is an amount of academic freedom in China where you can express alternative views, I think is counter to what a lot of Americans see. So it's good to know that.
I can tell you, my wife was. We took a lot of time. The global immersion and preparing for that was a little bit stressful, because we just didn't go there and do sightseeing. We had projects we had to do. We had to take a look at some of the ideas about what happens if America is no longer the backing or the basis for the stock market, and what would that be? Because we know China wants the yen to be the foundation of the stock market, or the foundation of the financial industry. And so when we were at Fudan, one of the professors was a Harvard professor, and she spoke about, and it was very interesting, because she didn't say it exactly. She kind of walked around it, but at the same time, we had asked a question pretty broad, we're executive MBA students, and we're at William & Mary, so we're really good. We asked the question about, what are you going to do about the manipulation of the yen and stabilizing your foundation for financial stability, and have that be a global, understood globally? And what things is China trying to do, and kind of what things can you describe to us that we have more faith that, if you were to continue to try to be that foundation, what would it look like? That question was, it took all day for that question because it's very impactful, because again, there's a lot of things about how their culture spends money, and about how they look at the goods, and then understanding where their monetary value is, and the dependency on it, and how it will affect all the financial institutions across the world if China were to become that replacement for the American dollar. And so that scared me a lot, because once I understood that when we're looking at forecasts for projection amounts for what the value of a yen may be or dollar may be, and how that impacts our ability to buy materials, that was scary to me.
Yeah, I think it's the yuan, right, in China.
Yeah, the yuan. Yes, excuse me.
Yeah, I think they've got a long way to go, because I think they're still on that list. I know the Trump administration branded them on the international list of currency manipulators. So I think you have to work your way off of that list before you could become an international standard for currency. But
yeah, I mean that's a pretty big deal, because the second part we did for Germany was, we were looking at a company to figure out, is this going to be something that we can have an acquisition? So it's really important for us to understand yuan, and it's important to understand, how the American dollar will hold up against that. And then once we were to acquire this company, what would be the impact of bringing that money, the repatriation of that money back into the United States? What would that look like? Because obviously Apple has a lot of money in Ireland, and a lot of businesses use there's a lot of money outside the United States. And I didn't really understand. I'm like, what's the big deal? Why is that a big deal? And why can't they bring it back in the United States? I had no clue until we're sitting in class, and, and our Professor Hewitt had said that, this is an important thing that we need to concentrate on, because as we look to acquire this business, we need to understand what the repatriation would be. We need to understand what the spot rates would be for the currency that we are going to use, whether it be the yuan, whether it be the dollar, and how that would impact our American business and our ability to operate with that business globally successfully.
Now, I can kind of speak to this in terms of our Chile experience. We looked at buying a winery. You have to understand, my background is people. I'm a counselor, is what I was prior to. And so I'm more into organizational behavior. And when you're looking at economics, along with the culture, I actually, when we did our write-up for Professor Hewitt, along with the math and everything that went along, my group decided not to purchase, because when we looked at the cultural background, when we looked at this hierarchy of different things, we established that it was very likely that despite maybe the financial possibilities, that it was very unlikely that we would do as well as the money said we would, because of their strong sense of family. It was a family-owned business. Their strong sense of family, their background, their history, their desire to keep everything together no matter what the cost. And we decided that they really wouldn't handle somebody coming in and jumping in and taking over very well. They wouldn't be as likely to listen to us and that sort of thing. So when we're talking about these immersions, that was really exciting for me to see and to experience and to learn about.
So it sounds like you would not have come away with that cultural understanding had you not had this experience and been able to apply it in a way that made you, allowed you to make a better business decision based on cultural norms and standards that you otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to.
Absolutely, because we got to go see the family work together. We got to see the day-to-day running of this business. We got to meet the people who were running just the day-to-day. Even though some of them were college students or fresh to the farm, as it were, they would actually speak to how they got there and why they wound up joining the family and what the relationships were. And that was very helpful in making a well-rounded decision outside of everything else.
Yeah, I think that's the power of the global immersion, because again, we cover so much material, and to be able to apply it and see it and kind of absorb that on your own time, because we're there long enough to kind of understand and take time to kind of immerse ourselves, which is the whole immersion piece, and just filter that, get that information in. Because I remember we're at Food On, and one of the courses we had done was, why does American companies and a lot of other companies fail in China? And I'm like, well, that's impossible. China has, a billion people there. Everything's great. And then they brought the topic up of KFC and McDonald's. And I was like, McDonald's almost didn't make it in China. And we were trying to figure out, how is that? And how is that possible with McDonald's being global? Well, China is a lot different in how they produce their goods and quality standards and processes. So that was interesting to find out. For instance, you go to McDonald's in Germany, the fries taste pretty much the same as they do in the United States. They may have a couple of additional marketing items that we don't have that are specific to their culture, but overall, a Big Mac's a Big Mac, and that is excuse me, that is what allows McDonald's to have that standardization across their whole organization. So McDonald's in the United States, whether it be in Kentucky or whether it be in New York, a Big Mac's a Big Mac. However, what we discovered was that they were having challenges with the supply chain and understanding, where to get potatoes. And then once you got the potato, how is that product managed throughout the process, for production to make it to a customer's plate. And the Chinese didn't necessarily have the processes in place and understood the quality standards that were necessary. And so they were struggling they were struggling in their ability to produce quality food, standard food that tastes the same as it should for, what McDonald's expects.
And I imagine the Chinese government doesn't allow McDonald's to secretly insert that addictive chemical that makes us all love those fries so much in this country, right?
Yes. Yeah, Starbucks had similar things as well. Starbucks had similar ideas about when they were trying to manage their product and figure out how do they supply chain and bring things in, because some of these locations where they're produced are remote. And so when you're looking at producing that product and getting that product in a timely manner within the quality standards and produced consistently, China struggles with that, and they needed a lot of help from the United States companies or from any company to make sure that works.
But they also strain to widespread because it's so expensive by the time they get through it. Like Starbucks for us is a norm. Starbucks for them, the average person, would be like going out to a fancy meal. when we went to Smithfield there in China, I think I found it interesting that they were really, 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 really good at shelf stable meat. And for us, we're like, oh, spam, right? Like, oh, stick meat that's, just on a shelf. Like we don't even think about that. But that was their primary focus, was shelf stable, because so many people throughout China don't even have refrigerators. And so they need that, and it needs to be priced where they can afford it.
Yeah, it does
So,
make you think about these economic models where, whether it be in this country or potentially a model in China, fast food, lower cost food, quick access versus Starbucks really being more of a premium brand that, not everybody across the world can spend $5-6 on a latte.
One of the other things I found that was interesting, and I can talk forever, Jana knows this. It's been a little while, but but it's starting to all come back to me because it was such an amazing experience.
yeah.
But one of the things that I thought was interesting was during this whole COVID that's currently impacting us is how is the migration and the immigration challenges that the EU has, how is that impacting the ability for the workers to be able to work in any area, any country within the EU? And then overall, looking at Britain right now is they're probably just hitting the jaw. They don't know, pretty much what to do. They have to handle their own economic problems with kind of pulling all those resources in from an EU perspective, and having to source that from Britain and by itself, or from England by itself. And then looking at how COVID has changed that model, how the EU has to change that model. They depend on cheap labor. That's how the whole world works. And I really didn't understand that until I got there and got to see, and we actually had a conversation with a few of them who were very happy. That is their life. That is their main way of making money. Is we went to manufacturing, and it's nothing but immigrants for the most part, with German management helping out. But they depend on that. They're very happy about that. COVID, I'm sure, has impacted that. And overall, what is that going to mean to their ability to produce products within Germany or within EU, period?
There are a number of Romanian and Polish workers here everywhere. Like it is a very high level of that. I know I saw the other day that they had actually full on stopped the UK from moving cattle into the Schengen area. And that's going to put a big stop on things. They may pick that back up again. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm saying, that was a really big thing, because that's a huge export for them into other areas of Europe is beef, right? And they ship them live, and then they're killed on site wherever in the other countries. And so because of COVID, they had tried to stop it. They're actually getting really, really insanely tight here, talking about things like requiring people to wear like a rubberized mask that's fitted, like you would have, you said military, so almost like a gas mask. Okay. And how they would afford to do that, I have no idea, but they have all kinds of ideas being thrown around to try and handle this, and they just keep getting tighter and tighter and tighter, making it so people can't go to work in essence. So like you said, it's a very real thing, and it's not going to be gone anytime soon, even with the vaccine.
I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. I'll leave you with my Chinese revelation story. So back, I went on an economic development tour to China, and we toured a number of cities, Shanghai, Hangzhou, Shenzhou, I forget, Beijing, of course. And one of the observations I had as I toured around the country was that everything seemed unfinished, right? You would see this sidewalk.
Absolutely.
With, pavers sort of piled up. Buildings
with nothing in them.
Yeah. A crane over the top of a building, but no workers. So finally I said to our guide, I said, why is everything unfinished? Why are there all these projects that have stopped? And she said to me, well, Chinese workers don't understand, because it's not part of how they're compensated, incentivization, and it's not driven by the government. The concept of incentivization to finish projects quicker or to do them better. So that was a revelation and a clear explanation for why there was so much unfinished work. And you'd have to imagine a pretty big cultural, influence on business in a country like the United States, where everything is about incentivization.
Yeah.
versus other countries that don't view or leverage that philosophy or concept in the same way.